wave expert, Larry Tans.
Hi. So this is the visionary track, and I want to talk about a vision of the future in digital. And there's a lot of talk in digital about interactivity and user-generated content, but the vision of the future that I'm going to present is one in which scripted, original programming has a massive impact on digital and becomes hugely valuable, if not the most valuable thing for digital networks. And that's the third wave. The idea is there was broadcast, and then cable, and now digital. And what we're going to look at is the way professionally produced scripted programming will drive huge value for these digital networks. The basic hypothesis is that digital is developing exactly the same way as cable television developed. And if we look at the evolution of cable, we see exact parallels with what's happening in digital. And if we extrapolate into the future, we can make some assumptions about what's going to happen. Then we'll talk about a couple of case studies for scripted original programming in digital. So just go back to the beginning. We had 3 networks. We had TVs with rabbit ears and really bad reception. And then cable was born. It was a utility. That's really what it started out as. Here's a great ad from how to get clear, snow-free TV by getting cable. Because remember, in the beginning, it was a shared antenna and then a shared signal. And then millions of these cable boxes were distributed around the country. And they also had all of these other channels other than the 3 networks. And there wasn't a whole lot on them. There was local access programming, great stuff like The Live Show, and some actually good programming like MTV. And I remember as a kid, this was the first time where in New York we turned to Channel G because there was actually something really good to watch. And suddenly those other channels started to become interesting and meaningful. The next wave of cable was television reruns and movie reruns. And if you wanted to watch The Brady Bunch every day of the week, you would go to cable to do that. And more people started to watch cable. The heyday of cable really started with the dawn of scripted originals, and HBO was the pioneer in this area. For those who remember Dream On, it was a fun show that was able to push the boundaries and show things that you couldn't show on broadcast television, and people started to realize there could be some interesting originals in this space. But then what happened was there was a proliferation of channels, and suddenly there were more channels than people really felt like they needed, and those channels struggled to figure out what their value was going to be. And shows really start to define networks. For HBO, to continue the example, Sex and the City, when The Sopranos came out, people were subscribing to HBO just to get The Sopranos. In fact, oftentimes they would cancel HBO in between seasons. And HBO starts to realize that these originals are actually driving subscribers more than the reruns of movies that to date had made them so successful. And we saw the same thing with Showtime, Weeds, Dexter, Homeland. And then what we started to see was huge success. So you have a hit like Homeland. The ratings are not as high as a show like Two Broke Girls, but the critical acclaim and the popularity and the buzz is just massive, and we saw it at this past year's Emmys. And then we also saw this in free cable. So an ad-supported network like AMC, their holy trinity of Mad Men, incredible critical reviews and awards, Breaking Bad, which was so popular that it became the flashpoint of the dispute between Dish Network and AMC. So AMC went out there saying, the Dish is taking away Breaking Bad from you. That's how popular the show was. And then, of course, Walking Dead, which shattered records for viewership. And if I stood up here a year ago and said, my vision in the future is a cable show will beat broadcast ratings repeatedly, you guys all would have laughed, but that in fact happened this year with Walking Dead. Just massive numbers. So in cable we've seen critical success, popularity, high profitability, and massive ratings. So at this point in the cable landscape, content really is king. And the value of networks and their subscriber growth is very much driven by that. So just to recap what's happened in cable, it started out as a utility. There was mass adoption. We saw the proliferation of public access shows. Then the rerun business got going, and originals is sort of where we are now and where we've been over the last few years. Now let's look at the internet. It started out as a utility. This is CompuServe from the early days. 1996, stock quotes, news, weather. And when I worked at AOL in the late 90s, we had this plaque by the elevators. I'm just going to read it because it's so poignant today. Everybody laughed at it when they used to see it back in the late 90s. We envision a day when the internet becomes as valuable of a utility as is the television and the telephone. It seemed absolutely preposterous and absolutely ridiculous. Then AOL sent out a disc and then about a million, several million CDs. And before we knew it, we reached this point. This is a recent study from Ad Age. And they asked people, if you had to give up one of these essential things, what would you give up? 49% of people would be willing to give up cable. Fewer people would be willing to give up their mobile phone. And the thing that people were least likely to give up was internet. In fact, they were more likely to stop eating than give up their internet. So this preposterous idea, this plaque that hung in the elevator that people would laugh at when they came to our offices at AOL, it's happened. Now we're in the wave of public access, and I would add in user-generated content, but it's much, much bigger. And again, the message here is everything's happening in digital as it did in cable, just much, much bigger and much, much faster. Look at Smosh, these two young guys who are the most subscribed channel on YouTube with over 7 million subscribers. Same idea as public access, just much, much bigger and much more successful. And then, of course, everybody is a producer. I'm sure we've all seen this. At least 167 million of us have. And 72 hours are uploaded to YouTube every minute. So we were seeing public access magnified immensely. And now we've entered the phase of reruns. Vudu, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Instant Video, iTunes, Redbox. You can pretty much find any movie or television show across these platforms. So we're seeing the rerun phase of cable happening super fast and magnified massively, and this huge adoption. The growth of consumption of movies on digital was pretty much at 0 in 2009 and 2010, and now we're up to 5 billion views of movies on video, and the declining light blue columns are physical DVD consumption. Again, it's happening really, really fast. We're seeing it happening, and it's happening much faster than cable, and now we're at a point where a third of the internet traffic during prime time is from Netflix streaming, a service that pretty much didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's a third of the data traffic. So again, it's happening just like cable, just much, much faster, and broadcast audiences are declining. So it's having a real impact on the business. But now in digital, differentiation really, really starts to matter. Look at Netflix, Hulu, iTunes. There's a lot of selection out there, and a lot of it's the same. And trying to navigate who has season 3 of Workaholics and who has season 2. Is it Amazon? Is it Netflix? A little bit confusing, but there's a lot of commonality against those. The same way trying to figure out what movies were on Showtime and Starz and HBO and TNT, it kind of got confusing, and people started to gather towards originals. So what's going to happen next? Scripted originals. Amazon Studios has announced a big initiative in scripted originals. Hulu has some very successful originals. One is The Booth at the End, which we'll talk about as a case study. Burning Love on Yahoo, produced by Ben Stiller's company, tens of millions of views and 2 more seasons happening. Mortal Kombat on machinima.com, again, tens of millions of views, hugely popular. These are the shows that are starting to find these networks. And then the granddaddy of them all, coming out on Friday on Netflix, House of Cards, a massive budget, high quality, high production value, star-driven original that will only be on Netflix. And this could be the Game of Thrones or Sopranos moment for Netflix, the way that was for HBO. And I truly believe that these original shows will define these networks. So content is king again in digital. And again, everything's happening so much faster. So Michael Eisner, together with Rogers, started a company, Vugaru, which I run, and we're all about developing and financing scripted programming for these new platforms, again, with the belief that these are the shows that will define these platforms. And the way the business works for us and the way the business model is successful is it's all scripted programming, it's multi-platform. I'll talk a little bit about that, which means it can run in mobile, it can run on television and everything in between. Broadcast quality, which enables that, and we're self-financing it. So we're taking creative risks just like television, and we're going out and making stuff and not waiting for advertisers to pay for it or the audience to donate the money for us to go do it, and it's based on great creative. The revenue model is a lot like television. It's license fees, and we also get revenue share in these ad-supported platforms, and it's windowed both in the US and internationally, and distributed around the world. And we're starting to see this. These are all partners of Vugaru who have paid to license programming from us. And 3-4 years ago, most of these entities, even some of the big ones like Fremantle Media or BBC, weren't in the business of licensing originals. And now you have Hulu, you have AOL, you have Yahoo, you have Sci-Fi Digital, CW Digital. Every 4 or 5 months, there seems to be a new buyer in the market for originals, the same way in cable. At some point, Lifetime started doing movies and Starz started doing originals, et cetera. And we operate with, we call it our Lego theory of programming, where we have shorter form versions of the programming that can be assembled into longer form. So if Yahoo wants 5 or 7 minute chapters, we can deliver that to them. And if Hulu wants half hours, we can combine our chapters into half hours and then also into features. So it's about that flexibility. And we've done about 22 of these titles now that are distributed all over the world. And the big guys are getting into the business too. Fremantle Media, we just announced a deal with them late last year where they'll be distributing Vugaru titles all around the world outside of North America, but selling them to not only digital, but also to television platforms. Let's look at a case study, and if you could cue the booth at the end trailer, and I'll walk through how to make and distribute scripted programming with the booth as a case study.
I heard you can do things.
I give people the opportunity to do things.
But you can make things happen, like magic.
There's something you need?
I want to be prettier.
What we do is we make an agreement.
What do I have to do?
I offer you a task. You do the task, you get what you want.
Tasks.
So if I do this thing, my son will live.
Do you make all the people that come to you harm someone?
I need to know one thing. How can I know you're not the devil?
You can't.
I was wondering what happens if I don't do this thing you asked me to do.
I'm not gonna rob a bank.
Look, I want you to stop her from wanting what she wants.
That's not the offer.
No,
that's on
hear
the
me out.
table.
I can't.
I already killed the guy for you. You want more?
What one begins, one must finish.
We'll make it stop.
I can't.
Give me something, a token of proof or something.
Start. See what happens.
So the booth is, thank you. So the booth is an original scripted drama, and it's produced in a really interesting way. It's 120 minutes long, it's 2 hours, but we created 4 products. 60 episodes at 2 minutes in running time, 10 episodes at 12 minutes, 5 television half hours, and a feature, and we've used those to distribute it all over the world. So on Hulu in the US, it launched as those half hours. Fox International channels ran the shorter chapters online and ran the half hours on television. And our sales partner, Content Media, has gone around the world and they've sold this into tons of territories, at SVOD, into television, into mobile, and again, it's scripted programming, but it fits to a lot of places. The reviews have been fantastic, and in many cases, it's been reviewed as a television show or as a digital show, depending on the territory in which it runs. We'll look at one more example. Can you cue up Little Women, Big Cars? And this is a scripted comedy that's about midway through its run, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well.
Chelsea, just buckle in. I didn't go to Mount Holyoke to be a soccer mom. Try it on the other arm.
Barb, that's shin guard.
Oh.
I think AJ hit on me.
What do you want me to say? I'll beat him up? I'll punch his lights out.
Yeah, something like that.
Fine.
You gotta learn to say no, Meg.
Well, I'm just gonna have to say no. You know?
Can I call on you again?
Anytime.
Great.
We're raising a whole generation of overscheduled little sharks. Have to keep them moving at every minute or they'll die.
Raising kids is a real job.
Then where's your paycheck?
Why did you get divorced?
My husband had left our house and was screwing other women. It was probably time to let go.
Cheers.
Men don't understand the messages behind stuff, you know? They're simpler than we are. It's been clinically proven. Next time we have kids, I'm the daddy.
Sam's family is meeting us in Vegas for Saturday night, and we're staying at the Venetian.
Are you taking the kids?
Oh, of course I am. They love the slots.
So this is a comedy in its second season, just like the booth at the end. It launched on AOL, massive views. 5 or 6 million views in the first couple of weeks, and also it's multi-platform, 17 5-minute chapters for AOL, 4 half hours and a feature, and BBC International Distribution is taking all of these formats out into the market. So in some cases they'll sell to digital, in some cases they'll sell to TV. So we're sort of left with what will happen. What is a hit? Have we seen a hit in this world? When will we see it? I think we need to really think about what defines a hit. Critical success, we're starting to see that. We've seen that with the booth. Audience, we're seeing that. Mortal Kombat, Halo, Little Women, Big Cars, big audiences. I mean, if you look at Homeland, it doesn't garner a massive audience, but it has all of these other things. And of course, profitability, and we're starting to see that. And I think for people who are sitting here saying, well, I'm a professional content producer, when will this market be real? I think in a year from now, we'll be looking back and seeing some of these seminal moments and some of these unbelievable things that I'm talking about will have happened. Because in each of these waves, the change accelerates. It took 70 years for half the country to get a telephone. It took about 30 years for half the country to get a VCR. It took 20 years for half the country to get a computer. It took 6 years for half the country to get internet. Things are just happening faster and faster. If you look at, this is one of my favorite ones, when Apple went out with the iPod and then the iPhone and then the iPad. You know, after 10 quarters, they had barely sold any iPods, but after 10 quarters, they had sold almost 100 million iPads. And how fast can this stuff happen? Gangnam Style reached 1 billion views, the most watched video on YouTube, and probably ever in history. And it did that in just a couple of months. And I love this chart. The blue line is Justin Bieber's Baby video, which was the most popular video ever on YouTube. And over 2 years, it almost reached 1 billion views. And the red line is Gangnam Style. It's amazing. In just a couple of months, it reached 1 billion views and became the most watched ever. So if you believe that something that goes up on Hulu doesn't have the potential to get 100 million views or an audience of 30 or 40 million people, you just have to look at these numbers and kind of suspend that disbelief. And so we truly believe that a scripted hit will happen soon on digital, and it's really going to change the landscape based on everything we've seen. Thank you very much.
You heard it here first. There will be a scripted hit in digital. Larry Tans, everybody. Put your hands together for Larry Tans. Woo! The third wave in digital is upon us. So, what was your favorite takeaway from that? Raise your hand, raise your hand. We're getting in it. We're interactive. We're having it. I'd love your feedback.